Hello everyone and welcome. Looks like we're starting this episode with some beingness. I'm not sure if your mind was ready to listen to words, but I often hear in videos I watch about how we shouldn't be waiting, because waiting implies that the mind is wanting something, it's expecting something. And often it is said when there is gaps between words or silence that there is no waiting for the silence to be over. You are just simply experiencing what is in every moment. So I'm back in my car. It's been a while since I've recorded an episode in my car. At one point my car felt like almost like a recording studio or a workspace, since I was recording a lot of episodes in my car. So just to touch upon what I mentioned last week, I mentioned about my Patreon page, and something didn't quite sit right with me as I was creating the page. And if you've not gone to Patreon before, there is a section where you can create rewards, almost a way of, perhaps entice is not the right word, but perhaps inspire people to contribute to your creativity. And after I had done that process, something didn't quite sit right with me. I was very anxious. And I mentioned this in a written post I posted on my Patreon page about being in the spotlight or asking for something from people. Often I find that very difficult. So for the time being, I will leave the page up there, but I won't be, advertising it or promoting it in the near future. I think for the moment I'll just leave it be as it is. And some things in life, you'll pick up that they don't just sit right with you. There's a different vibration to it. There's almost a nagging feeling about it, and that's perhaps our intuition saying that this may not be right for me at this time, and it could be something completely normal. It could be a job you're going for, a new friend that perhaps you need some distance from, or a family member where you need some distance from. It could be something as small as buying something in a shop and you've realised that you don't really need it, and there's a feeling inside there that perhaps will continue to grow as long as you have that. So often our intuition is communicating with us, but a lot of the time perhaps we're not tuned into it. And being in heavy thoughts, being in the mind, can perhaps dull that natural intuition we all have. And I've had a week where the present moment has largely been covered up, and there hasn't been any desire to be present or to practice present momentness. And perhaps that could be the pain body, or just lots of pain inside of me. And for those of you who have just tuned in to this episode and haven't listened to any previous ones, what I mean by pain body, it's a term Eckhart Tolle uses, is for remnants of pain from the past that have been triggered. And it doesn't have to have a direct link to it. It could be anything that triggers the accumulated pain in your past, and that pain has been unresolved. And it's probably safe to say we all have some accumulated pain. Maybe it's fairer to say we may have a lot of accumulated pain from our lives. And this often can be triggered. And one simple way to know if it's the pain body is if the pain you're feeling is not, trying to think of the word, is not the same as what triggered the feeling. So something small could happen to you. Someone could beep at you on the road, if you don't pull away fast enough or don't react quick enough or something. Somebody may shout through their windscreen and you may start crying or be in deep pain. That could be an example of the pain body, where the pain you're feeling doesn't justify the action that took place, but it has awakened something in you. And I guess there's no black and white rules, so it doesn't have to be that. It could be something quite painful that triggers lots of pain inside of you. And that's what happened to me this week. As some of you know, I'm in a position where a lot of my life is up in the air right now, in terms of my health and where I'm living. Which I've mentioned in previous audios. And so a lot of pain was triggered these last couple of weeks, or this last week. And the last thing I wanted to do was be present. And that makes perfect sense, because the mind doesn't understand the present moment. There are almost two dimensions. Wouldn't be an accurate word, because it's even more bigger than that, but you can look at it as two separate dimensions: being in the present moment and being in a thought. Such is the vast experience, the gap of what you experience in those moments. But the pain body passes, or the experience of being in a lot of pain passes. And for me, what helped a lot was when I watched a video on, I think Eckhart Tolle was talking about Krishnamurti. Probably not pronouncing his name right, but there we go. And he was talking about his life. And he was reading Krishnamurti's notebook, which is some journals he had written in his past. And that video helped just to realign myself. And I didn't think in that moment, I should have listened to this before. That I could have helped myself earlier, because that wouldn't have been true. I almost had to wait for the pain to subside enough, and then the urge to listen came, the wanting to listen. because being in the pain body, in a thick amount of heavy clouds over you, often once you're in there, it's extremely tough to get out until it passes. You're just in that pain, and if someone tells you, "Oh, do some meditation," that's the last thing you'd want to do. It would almost be painful to hear that, because you just wouldn't even want to hear that. You're so sick of, and it's almost as if the mind, or you want to feel the pain. And part of the mind's job is to keep itself alive, the egoic mind. It knows with this pain you're identifying with it, and it's feeding it almost. And one thing I'd mentioned with the pain body is to try and be as present as possible, which is a contradiction to what I've just said, where it can be very difficult. But it's not a case of, you must be completely present and completely calm, completely clear. It's perhaps just being aware of how painful it is. Because what that will do is that will stop your mind fueling that pain experience and make it longer and even add to it as well. We talked about accumulated pain, and one thing we do is we're adding to it. Every time we get angry and it's nothing, some emotion's being created, has not been resolved. And again, I can use the example of being on the road driving, because if you are a driver or even a passenger, you're probably aware of road rage and how common it is in people. And that's just people's pain body or people's unconsciousness, where somebody cuts them off and they're banging their horn and shouting, swearing, like they've just stolen all of their money. That's the response at times. So I talked on the last episode a little bit about my process, or little ways I incorporate presentness in my day-to-day life. And I did ask the question underneath in the description, how can you bring this into your practice? I think I used the examples of making a cup of tea, brushing my teeth, or walking down the stairs, things like that. And just while this has come into my mind, at the current moment I'm uploading this audio to Anchor, and Anchor distributes this podcast to other podcast platforms, such as Spotify, or Spotify is not a podcast platform, but to iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and various others, and it does upload it to Spotify as well. And what I do is I manually upload these audios to YouTube as well. And that's something I may stop for the moment. I may just keep it on the podcast platforms as well as Spotify, as it makes it a lot easier for me to do that, because as you well know, I'm just recording this. I've got a very small microphone I plug into my phone, and I record this onto the app that can be uploaded. And so that will save me the task of putting it together into a video and uploading it. And I've noticed a lot of the audience that listen to this podcast are on podcast platforms, not a huge amount on YouTube. So that's a good thing as well, if I am looking to stop that. So if you'd like to continue listening to future episodes, then you can look in the description of the YouTube video. There will be links to all of the podcast platforms, and also Spotify as well, if that's something you have. So I thought I would just mention that now before I forget, and suddenly you don't see any more YouTube uploads anymore, so that's why. So just going back to this vast gap between mind and being in the present moment. The gap is quite easy to see when you've come from a very painful experience, and then you've entered presence. And you can almost see the gap there is almost coming in from a monsoon. There's just lashing of rain, being drenched, and suddenly you step into sunshine. And it's probably more than that as well, the experience, the gap between being in the mind and being in the present moment. And like I said, the mind, the last thing the mind would want to hear, especially when it's in pain, is about meditation and present momentness. That's how I felt. And often I find it's easy to put all of these things in one large canvas. Pain, having great present moment experiences is all part of the same canvas. And as long as you have a almost zoomed out viewpoint on all of this happening, even our life, then it won't be a case where you're in reaction, where you've suddenly lost a present moment and you're reacting to that and creating a big drama out of it and thinking, oh God, I wasn't present this morning, or it's been several days that's happened. It's that will just be your learning experience, because I've certainly been through that. There's almost a newness of something. I'm not sure if I've touched upon this before, but when something new happens to us, we often care for it more and we're more sensitive to changes of it. So let's take present momentness. We may try and do it every minute of the day. Once we've understood what it is, we may try and always, have this enormous enthusiasm to try and be present at all times. And then suddenly when it's lost, there may be a big reaction. You may even be distraught at it and be really down. And so almost steady yourself like a marathon, just simply going at a steady pace. And you pick the pace. And there's half a dozen kids riding on their bikes, if that picks up on the microphone. The car park I'm in, the supermarkets are closed right now, so I think they are taking advantage of the space and enjoying themselves on their bikes, so I'll leave them to it. So going back to the newness of this, be aware of a deep desire to be present, because there is a subtle difference between almost an urge to be present, which is more of a direction you want to head in, a natural, an almost natural motivation to be present. And then there is a deep desire, which is almost a lot sharper. It's almost where your mind comes in and says, okay, I need this, I need to be present. And there's a subtle difference between that, because deep desire is often where the mind has creeped in and is trying to achieve something. It's trying to get a goal. Where when you have a natural urge, it's just simply a direction you're heading in. So today I spent the morning doing meditation. I went to the temple and did some chanting, some mantra meditation. I could almost feel the effects of that effort. And often when we are in gatherings, we would often do more than we would do ourselves, I find. We could take the example of a group of people running. When you're in a group, you'll tend to put in more of an effort, or in some ways it'll be more effortless to go further than you would yourself. You'd have that community, that kind of group, that one energy between all of you as you're doing it. And I found that this morning as the chanting was happening, I was feeling tired. My mind was like, okay, when is this finishing? A little bit like that. And another part of my mind was coming in saying, no, just stay present. And so I managed to chant and listen and just be present for a lot longer than had I been there alone. And spiritual teachers often mention, having a sangha, having a community. It can even be 2 or 3 people where you meet up to be mindful or meditate. And it can be very simple, even for 5 or 10 minutes. If there are a few of you there, you can sit together and do some present moment practice. And perhaps talk to your friends about this as well. You may not want to reference these audios, but there's plenty out there which will give a clearer explanation about this. But, introduce any other spiritual teacher that has moved you. Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, Thich Nhat Hanh, there's Alan Watts, there's a lot of his audios on YouTube, and many, many others. And perhaps you can create your own little community where together on a regular basis you can get together and maybe watch a video or do some present momentness practice together. That could be something. Often I lose track of how long I've been speaking for. So right now it could easily be half an hour, or it could just be 10 minutes. So I'm just going to check my phone, see what's happening. 23 minutes, okay. So as well as continuing your practice, if you have managed to incorporate some present moment practice during this week in certain activities, whether it's getting out of bed and being present, or going for a walk, or moving around in your house, making a cup of tea, perhaps that's something that you can build on and even journal about it if that's something you wish to do. It could be an idea to journal your progress, your experience, and something to look back on. And that may also help you to understand where you are as well. For me, one activity I'm going to try and be present with is watching TV. Often when I'm watching a TV series I thoroughly enjoy, as we've all been there, it's easy to lose myself in it. For example, I'll be watching the episode and then suddenly the episode's over and I'm like, where did those 45 minutes go? So I'm going to try and perhaps incorporate some present momentness in what I watch as well. And I think that's helped me already. I think I probably don't watch as much TV as I used to, or I have less of a threshold for certain quality of TV shows. If something I don't enjoy fully, then I may not and may put me off to watch it, where in the past, if it was something half good, then I may have left it on and watched many hours of that. But so that's something I'm going to do, and it could be something simple as well. It's, checking in with myself now and again, being aware of the seat I'm sitting on while watching, and being aware of watching, checking in with the perceiver that's witnessing what's happening at the moment. So perhaps that's something you can do with something you enjoy. And slowly, this will become a natural process of becoming present, and people may notice that in you, that you're more centered or more, maybe perhaps more calm or more attentive when interacting. So that's also always a good sign if somebody notices that with you as well. And that's something perhaps I will talk about in the next episode, about how your present moment can affect others. I may touch upon that also. So again, just a reminder as I wrap up this episode, that this will be the last episode for the time being that I will upload to YouTube. I will simply now just continue uploading to Anchor and iTunes and various other podcast platforms as well. So I hope you can switch across if you're one of the listeners on YouTube. Okay, well, thank you for joining me here, and I wish you well in this moment, and I will speak to you again very soon.